The December cold cut through the cabin walls like a blade through paper. Montana winter, 1930. 57 years since that summer, and Silas Mackenzie could still feel the heat of it on his skin. At 90 years old, his body had become a catalog of failures. Joints that screamed with every movement, lungs that rattled like stones in a tin can. Hands that once could skin a beaver in under 3 minutes now trembled when they tried to hold a coffee cup. But his mind remained sharp as the skinning knife he kept under his pillow. Sharp enough to remember every detail of the summer that changed everything. Sharp enough to know he was dying and that some stories deserved to be told before the teller went silent forever. His grandson Henry sat beside the bed, 19 years old, and carrying the weight of fresh heartbreak like a stone in his chest. The boy had just been cast aside by the Miller girl, told he wasn't man enough, wasn't strong enough, wasn't enough, period. The rejection had carved something hollow in his eyes that Silas recognized all too well. Henry's voice came out rough with unshed tears. "Granddad, how did you know Grandma was the right woman? Everyone in town still talks about her like she was some kind of freak, a giant who no normal man would want. But you married her anyway." Why? Silas closed his eyes. Sarah's face materialized behind his eyelids like she'd never left. 6'7" of raw strength and hidden tenderness. Eyes the color of Montana winter sky. Hands that could split logs like kindling, but touched his face with the gentleness of falling snow. "Boy, sit down and stop your fidgeting. I'm going to tell you about the summer of 1873. About 42 cowards and one choice that saved my soul. About your grandmother, the strongest and most beautiful woman who ever walked this earth. And when I'm done, you'll understand something most men never learn. The greatest treasures are the ones everyone else is too afraid to claim." Henry pulled out a notebook, pencil poised, his hands steadied as he prepared to write. The gesture reminded Silas of Sarah, the way she'd approached every task with that same quiet intensity. The old man's voice dropped lower, pulling the story up from a place deep in his chest where it had lived for nearly 6 decades. "It was July of 1873, and I was 33 years old. Been living in the Bitterroot Mountains for near about 4 years, coming down to civilization maybe twice a year to sell pelts and buy supplies. Nothing more. I'd buried my wife Anna and our stillborn son in the frozen ground 4 winters prior, and I'd buried my desire to live alongside them. Up in those mountains, I existed more than lived. Trap lines in winter, hunting in summer, moving through the wilderness like a ghost, speaking to no one, needing no one. The silence suited me. Or so I told myself every morning when I woke alone in a cabin that still smelled like Anna's lavender soap, even though she'd been dead long enough for the scent to have faded from anything except my memory. That July day, the heat sat on Copper Ridge like a wool blanket soaked in kerosene. The kind of heat that made men mean and dogs lazy. I'd come down from the mountains with a pack full of summer pelts, mostly beaver and mink, worth maybe $60 if I haggled right. Planned to sell, resupply, and disappear back into the high country before anyone could engage me in conversation. I tied my mule outside Miller's General Store and started unloading pelts when I heard the commotion up the street. Shouting, a woman crying, the particular quality of silence that falls when a whole town stops to watch someone's humiliation. My first instinct was to ignore it. Whatever drama was unfolding had nothing to do with me. I'd learned that lesson hard over the years. Get involved in other people's problems, and you end up carrying weight that isn't yours to bear. But then I heard the old woman's voice crack with desperation, and something in that sound reached through 4 years of deliberate numbness and grabbed hold of something I thought had died with Anna. "Please, she's a good woman. Strong, faithful, hardworking. The diocese is taking our land in 30 days unless she marries. 42 men have refused. You're our last hope." I walked toward the sound without deciding to. My feet just carried me there, pulled by that note of absolute desperation. The scene that greeted me belonged in a painting of biblical suffering. Mother Agnes, who I recognized as the elderly nun who ran the old Spanish mission convent 7 miles outside town, was on her knees in the dirt of Main Street. Her habit was dusty, her weathered face streaming with tears that carved clean tracks through the grime. Before her stood Thomas Pritchard, a decent rancher I'd traded with a few times. His face was red with embarrassment, his hat crushed in his hands as he looked anywhere but at the old woman kneeling before him. "Mother Agnes, I got a wife and 5 kids, even if I didn't. Sister Sarah, she's too much, too big, too strong. People say she killed a man with her bare hands. I can't bring that into my home." The old nun's voice rose to something near a wail. She defended herself. "The man tried to rape another sister. She had every right to fight back." Thomas Pritchard's voice dropped, almost kind in its cruelty. "I know, Mother, I know. But the church says she's demon-touched. Bishop himself excommunicated her. I can't marry someone the church has damned. I just can't." He turned and walked away, and Mother Agnes collapsed forward, her forehead touching the dust. The sound that came from her was beyond weeping. It was the sound of hope dying. That was when I looked at the wagon. Sitting in the back, knees drawn up in a futile attempt to make herself smaller, was a woman unlike any I'd ever seen. The first word that came to mind was monumental. She towered, even sitting down, shoulders broad as a barn door, arms thick with muscle earned through labor rather than display. She wore a simple brown dress that had clearly been altered and re-altered to accommodate her frame. Dark hair hung in a long braid down her back, bits of hay stuck in it like she'd been sleeping in the barn. Her skin was bronze from outdoor work, the kind of deep tan that comes from years under the sun rather than a single summer. But it was her eyes that stopped my breathing. Blue, clear as high country ice melt, and filled with a pain so profound it was like looking into a mirror of my own soul. This was a woman who knew suffering intimately, who had made peace with being unwanted, who had stopped hoping for anything except for the humiliation to end. I watched as she sat there absolutely still while her caretaker wept in the street, and the town watched like this was entertainment laid on for their amusement. She didn't cry, didn't protest, just sat with a dignity that was almost unbearable to witness, waiting for rejection, number 43. Anna's last words came back to me with the force of revelation. I was holding her as she bled out the baby already dead in my arms, and she'd used her final breaths to make me promise something. "Silas, promise me you won't let anyone suffer alone like I did. Promise me." I'd promised. Then I'd spent 4 years breaking that promise every single day by choosing isolation over connection, survival over life. The words came out of my mouth before my brain caught up to what I was doing. "Ma'am, I heard your question." The street went silent in a different way. The watching crowd drew a collective breath. Mother Agnes's head snapped up, hope and disbelief warring in her ancient eyes. But I wasn't looking at Mother Agnes. I was looking at the woman in the wagon. Sister Sarah, the demon nun, the giant who'd killed a man. She didn't move at first. Then slowly, like a mountain coming to life, she turned her head and met my gaze. The world contracted to just the two of us. Everything else, the crowd, the heat, the old woman in the dirt, it all fell away. There was just this woman with winter sky eyes and a pain so deep it made my own grief look shallow. I saw a recognition in her face. Not of me specifically, but of the loneliness. She saw it in me the same way I saw it in her. Two people who'd been discarded by the world, who'd learned to expect nothing, who'd armored themselves in silence and distance. I started walking toward the wagon. The crowd parted like I was carrying plague. In Copper Ridge, I had a reputation as the ghost trapper, the man who lived wild in the mountains, who came to town smelling of wood smoke and animal blood, who never smiled and rarely spoke. People gave me space the way you give space to a wounded predator. My name's Silas Mackenzie. I trapped the Bitterroot Range 8 months out of the year. Lost my wife Anna 4 winters back. Childbirth complications. No doctor within 60 miles. The baby died too, couple hours after she did. Buried them both in frozen ground. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. I wasn't used to stringing more than 5 words together anymore. I know what it's like to be alone. To wake up every morning wishing you died instead. To live in a world that's moved on while you're still trapped in the same nightmare, walking the same circles, breathing but not really living. Mother Agnes scrambled to her feet, dirt clinging to her habit. "Mr. Mackenzie, you don't understand what you're offering to do. The situation is complicated, and there are requirements that must be met if we're to save the land." I held up one hand, still not breaking eye contact with the woman in the wagon. "I'm not talking to you, ma'am. With respect, this isn't your decision to make." For the first time perhaps in her entire life, someone was treating Sister Sarah like a person with agency rather than a problem requiring a solution. I took another step closer to the wagon, close enough now to see the details. The calluses on her massive hands. The old scars on her knuckles from work or fighting or both. The way she held herself so carefully still, like she was afraid any movement might shatter whatever fragile hope was building in the space between us. Miss Brennan, I used her secular name, deliberately acknowledging that the church had stripped her of the title sister. I'm not here because Mother Agnes begged 43 men, and I'm the only one desperate or stupid enough to say yes. I'm here because when I looked at you just now, I saw something I recognize. What? Her voice was deeper than expected, rough with disuse, like she'd forgotten how to speak from not being listened to. Someone who's been punished by the world for things outside their control. Someone who's learned to expect nothing, so disappointment can't touch them anymore. Someone who's so tired of hurting that numbness feels like mercy. Her breath caught. The sound was small, almost swallowed, but I heard it. I'm not a rich man, I continued. Got a trapping cabin 40 miles north in the high country. No real property to speak of. I owe money to the general store and probably to half a dozen other folks I've forgotten about. My reputation in this town is worth less than the dirt Mother Agnes is kneeling in. The crowd muttered. Someone laughed low and mean. But I'm honest. I work harder than any three men. And I don't run from things that scare me just because other people say I should. I reached into my pack and pulled out my finest pelt. A beaver prime quality, the fur thick and lustrous. Worth $20 on its own. In the culture of mountain men and trappers, offering your best pelt was the beginning of courtship. It said, I value you enough to give you something precious. I held it up to her, had to reach high, because even sitting, she was taller than me standing. So here's what I'm proposing, Miss Brennan. Not to Mother Agnes, not to the church, to you and you alone. The street was so quiet I could hear a dog panting 3 buildings away. Give me 30 days. Let me court you the way a woman deserves to be courted, not like livestock being sold at auction. Let me prove I'm not like those 42 cowards who couldn't see past your size to the person underneath. At the end of 30 days, if you want to send me away, I'll go. No debt owed, no obligations, no strings attached to trip you up later. But if you choose to marry me, it'll be because you want to, not because you have to. Your choice, Momo. And nobody else's. Mother Agnes made a sound of protest. Mr. Mackenzie, you need to understand the full situation. The diocese has requirements. Sister Sarah must marry and produce a legitimate heir within 18 months, or the convent land reverts to church control. Father Hayes already has buyers lined up. She wrung her hands, tears still streaming. It's not just marriage we need. The union must be consummated. The church requires proof of she struggled with the words marital relations. And if Sarah doesn't conceive within 18 months, we lose everything. The land, the buildings, the orphans we care for, all of it gone. The crowd erupted in murmurs. This was better than a traveling show. The town freak and the hermit trapper, and now there were requirements of biblical proportions. I felt my jaw tighten. So you're asking me to bet her on a schedule determined by priests who've never touched a woman? To treat conception like a business transaction without a deadline? Mother Agnes's face crumpled. I'm asking you to save her. To save us. I know it's not fair. I know it's asking too much. But I have nowhere else to turn. Before I could respond, the woman in the wagon spoke. I release you from your offer, Mr. Mackenzie. Her voice was stronger now, edged with something like anger. This is too much to ask of anyone. You don't know me. You don't know what I've done, what I'm capable of doing. She held up her hands, and even from 6 feet away, I could see they were trembling. These hands killed a man, snapped his neck when he tried to force himself on me. The church said it was excessive force, that I should have prayed for intervention instead of defending myself with violence. But I didn't pray. I fought. I won. And I killed him. Her eyes locked on mine, challenging me to recoil. So walk away now, Mr. Mackenzie. Before you tie yourself to a woman the church itself has declared demon-possessed. Before you damn your own soul trying to save someone who's already lost. The silence that followed was absolute. I stood there, this massive woman looking down at me even from her seat in the wagon, her eyes daring me to prove I was just like all the others. Just another man who'd run when confronted with who she really was. I thought about Anna, about the promise I'd made and broken every day since, about 4 years of half living in the mountains running from connection, because connection meant the possibility of loss, and I'd already lost everything that mattered. But standing there looking at Sarah Brennan, I realized I had a choice. I could turn around, go back to my safe numbness, my comfortable isolation, or I could do something terrifying and possibly stupid. I could choose to live again. Miss Brennan, my voice came out steady, stronger than I felt. 4 years ago, I stood over my wife's grave in a blizzard and swore two things. First, that I'd never let anyone suffer alone if I could help it. Second, that I'd never waste another day being afraid to really live. I broke both promises by hiding in the mountains, by choosing survival over life. But today, standing here, I'm keeping them. Both of them. I stepped closer to the wagon right up against the side and held the beaver pelt higher. 30 days. Court you proper. Learn who you are, let you learn who I am. And at the end, we decide together, not the church, not Mother Agnes, not this town full of cowards. We decide if we want to build a life together. What about the heir requirement? Her voice was barely above a whisper. What about the church's timeline if we marry and God sees fit to bless us with children that would be a blessing? But I won't let some priest's calendar dictate when or how we come together as husband and wife. That's between you, me, and whatever God actually exists, not the one these churchmen have invented to control people. If intimacy happens, it happens because we both want it, because we're ready, not because someone threatens to take your home if we don't perform on command. Her massive hand reached down slowly like she was afraid the pelt might disappear if she moved too fast. When her fingers touched the fur, then touched my hand beneath it, I felt electricity shoot up my arm. Why? The word came out broken. Why would you risk everything for someone you don't even know? Because when I looked at you, I didn't see a demon or a giant or any of the cruel things this town sees. I saw a woman who's been fighting her whole life just to survive. Someone who's been told she's wrong, she's too much, she's broken, when the real truth is the world is too small and too scared to make room for her. I squeezed her hand gently, felt the strength in her fingers, the careful control she exercised to keep from crushing my bones. And I thought maybe we're fighting the same war. Maybe two people who've been discarded can help each other find a way back to living instead of just surviving. Get in the wagon. Her voice was sudden, decisive. If you're serious, get in. The convent is 7 miles from here. You can see what you're actually signing up for before you make promises you can't keep. I didn't hesitate. Untied my mule from the hitching post, secured it to the back of the wagon, tossed my pack into the bed. Then I climbed up onto the bench beside her. The wagon groaned under our combined weight. She was easily twice my mass, maybe 230 pounds of solid muscle. The bench was barely wide enough for both of us. Our shoulders touched hers, nearly twice the width of mine. Behind us, the town erupted. Men shouting, women gasping. Someone yelled that I was crazier than a rabid dog. Another voice placed bets on how long before the demon nun killed me in my sleep. But Mother Agnes didn't waste time listening to their poison. She scrambled into the back of the wagon with surprising speed. For a woman her age, grabbed the reins and snapped them hard. The horses lurched forward. Copper Ridge disappeared behind us in a cloud of dust and judgment. For the first 3 miles, nobody spoke. The only sounds were wagon wheels crunching over packed dirt horses, laboring in the heat wind, whistling through the sparse Montana grassland that stretched to the mountains in every direction. I could feel tension radiating off Sarah like heat from a forge. She sat rigid, that beaver pelt clutched in her lap like it was the only real thing in a world of illusions. I noticed she held it the way a drowning person holds driftwood. Finally, I broke the silence. How long has Mother Agnes been asking? Sarah flinched like I'd struck her. 3 months. Ever since Father Hayes issued his ultimatum. She started with men she knew, former donors to the convent, friends of my father from before he died, then strangers, then anyone with a pulse and a pair of working legs. A laugh escaped her, bitter as alkali water. You were number 43, Mr. Mackenzie. In case you were wondering where you ranked, Silas. Call me Silas. And I don't care if I was number 443. I didn't say yes because I was the last option. I said yes because I wanted to. She turned to look at me then. Really look. Her eyes were searching for the lie, the trick. The moment when I'd reveal this was all just another cruel joke at her expense. What do you get out of this? A strong workhorse who can haul timber and work like three men, bragging rights as the only man brave enough to approach the demon nun, some kind of revenge against the church. Her voice was getting louder, angrier. Or maybe you're one of those men with peculiar tastes. Maybe you want a woman who can overpower you. Is that it? Some kind of twisted desire for someone who could break you in half. Hey, my voice came out sharp enough to cut through her spiral. Don't talk about yourself like that. Don't reduce yourself to what cruel people have said about you. Why not? That's what everyone calls me. Freak, giant, demon spawn, the woman who killed a man with her bare hands. She looked down at those hands, flexed the fingers. These are murder weapons, according to the church. Tools of Satan. The wagon hit a rut and jostled us together. Her arm pressed against mine, solid and warm and undeniably real. Do you want to know what really happened? Her voice dropped lower. Why I was really excommunicated. I nodded. I was 26. Had been a nun for 12 years, took my vows at 14 when my parents died of typhoid. The convent was my home, my family, everything I knew. She stared straight ahead, but I could see she wasn't seeing the road. She was seeing the past. One night a drifter broke in, drunk looking for valuables. He found Sister Margaret in the chapel. She was only 16, had just taken her vows that spring. Sweet girl, innocent. I heard her scream, ran from my cell to the chapel. He had her pinned on the altar, knife at her throat was tearing at her habit. I didn't think, didn't pray, didn't hesitate, just reacted. Her hands clenched the beaver pelt so hard I thought she might tear it. I grabbed him by the neck, threw him off her. He hit the stone floor and I heard something snap. Later they told me I'd broken his neck. He died instantly. Jesus Christ, I breathed. Sister Margaret was hysterical. Mother Agnes called, the sheriff called the bishop. There was an inquest. The sheriff ruled it justifiable defense, but the bishop overruled him. Her voice went flat, emotionless, in the way of people recounting unbearable trauma. Bishop said I used excessive force unbecoming a bride of Christ, that a true servant of God would have prayed for divine intervention rather than acting with violence. He said my size and strength were evidence of demonic influence because no natural woman could kill a grown man with her bare hands. How long between grabbing him and him hitting the floor? I asked. She blinked, surprised by the question. I don't know. Seconds, maybe 3 or 4 seconds total. Men who've never had someone they love threatened. Men who can afford the luxury of theoretical morality because they've never been tested. We rode in silence for another half-mile. Then Sarah spoke again, quieter. There's more. After the inquest, the bishop ordered an exorcism, said my ability to kill a man proved demonic possession. I felt my hands clench into fists on my thighs. They exorcised you, tried to, chained me in the chapel basement for 5 days. Father Hayes and 2 other priests. They read scripture at me through holy water, beat me with rods when I resisted their prayers. Her voice started shaking. No food, water only twice a day. They said they were driving the demon out, that the hunger and pain would weaken Satan's hold on my flesh. On the 5th day, the chains broke. I didn't break them on purpose. I was delirious from hunger, my wrists were bleeding from the shackles, and when Father Hayes raised the rod again, I just pulled without thinking. The chains snapped. Old iron probably rusted through, but they took it as proof the demon was so strong it could break blessed chains, so they excommunicated me on the spot. Cast me out of the only home I'd ever known. I was shaking with rage. Every word she spoke made me want to ride back to Copper Ridge, find Father Hayes, and show him what real violence looked like. But instead I reached over and took her hand. She tensed but didn't pull away. Sarah Brennan, listened to me. You are not demon-possessed. You are not cursed. You are a woman with unusual strength who saved a girl from rape and then survived torture at the hands of cowards wearing holy robes. But the church said, the church is wrong. I cut her off. Not wrong about everything, maybe, but wrong about you. Dead wrong. How can you know that? Because I've spent 4 years in the wilderness, seen God in the way morning light hits a mountain peak, in the way a mother bear protects her cubs, in the way a wolf pack works together to survive winter, and that God, the real one, doesn't make mistakes, doesn't create abominations. If you're big and strong, it's because you were meant to be for a reason. Maybe to save that girl, maybe to save others, but not as punishment or curse. She was crying now, silent tears tracking down her bronze face. No one's ever said anything like that to me before. Then everyone else is a fool. The wagon rolled on. The mountains grew larger ahead of us, purple and gray against the pale blue sky. And for the first time in 4 years, I felt something other than emptiness, something fragile and terrifying, something that might have been hope. Tell me about Anna, Sarah said after a while, if you're willing. I took a breath. Anna was small, 5'2", 90 pounds. Everyone said we were mismatched. I'm 6'1", 220. But Anna was tough, grew up homesteading, knew how to work. I paused, gathering the words. When she got pregnant, we were happy, planned to expand the cabin, build a real home. But in her 8th month, something went wrong. Bleeding, cramping. We were snowed in nearest doctor 60 miles away in Copper Ridge. The words came harder now. I did everything I knew. Packed the wounds, made teas from bark like the Crow women taught me. But the bleeding wouldn't stop. She labored for 19 hours, screaming my name, begging me to save the baby. My voice cracked. Baby came out blue. Cord wrapped around his neck 3 times. Dead before he drew breath. And Anna, she just kept bleeding. Hemorrhaged in my arms. Last thing she said was, "Promise me you won't let anyone suffer alone like I did. Promise me, Silas." I promised. Then I buried her and our son in frozen ground. When spring came, I reburied them proper, carved their names on a pine marker. I met Sarah's eyes. I rode to Copper Ridge after the thaw, found Father Hayes, begged him to come bless the graves. He refused. Said Anna died in sin because we lived outside God's community. Said our baby couldn't be blessed because he wasn't baptized. That's when I knew the church and I were finished. Any God who'd deny peace to a dead woman and baby over geography and paperwork, that's not a God I can follow. Sarah squeezed my hand. We're both outcasts then. Maybe. Or maybe we're just people the church decided weren't worth saving. I squeezed back. For the next 30 days, I'm going to prove something to you. That not everyone judges you by size or church decree. That 2 broken people can help each other heal. What if I can't be fixed, then we'll be broken together. And that's still better than being broken alone. The convent of the Sacred Heart appeared on the horizon like a mirage. Old Spanish mission architecture, weathered stone walls the color of dried blood, a chapel with a bell tower that listed slightly to the left. 800 acres of grassland and forest stretched out around it, green and wild and beautiful. But the place had an air of abandonment. Broken windows, overgrown fields, fences sagging. The only signs of life were Mother Agnes and 2 other elderly nuns working a small garden near the main building. Sarah climbed down from the wagon, and I saw her at her full height for the first time. 6'7" of solid muscle and barely contained power. She moved with surprising grace for someone her size, each motion controlled and deliberate. She wore that brown dress that had been altered so many times the seams were visible, let out and taken in, and let out again to accommodate a body that refused to stop growing. Her hair hung in that long braid, bits of straw still caught in it. When she turned to help Mother Agnes down, I saw old scars on her back through the thin fabric. Whip marks from the exorcism. "This is it." Her voice was flat, resigned. "This is what you said yes to. A condemned convent, 3 dying old women, and a daughter the church calls demon-possessed. Still want those 30 days? Silas Mackenzie, I looked at the land, the mountains beyond the chapel with its crooked bell tower. Looked at Sarah standing there like a warrior waiting for the final blow. More than ever, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. Mother Agnes disappeared into the kitchen, muttering about putting together something resembling supper. Sarah led me on a tour of the property, her stride long and purposeful, eating up ground so fast I had to work to keep pace. 600 acres of grazing land, she said, gesturing at the rolling grassland that stretched toward the mountains. 200 more of forest. Good timber if anyone had the strength to work it. The chapel hasn't held services since my excommunication. Father Hayes forbid it, says the building itself is corrupted by my presence. She pushed open the barn door with one hand, casual as breathing, though the door was heavy oak that would have taken me both hands and real effort to move. Inside, the smell of animals, in hay and neglect. 30 goats, she continued, voice flat like she was reciting an inventory. We had 80 before the church cut our funding. Had to sell most just to buy food. 4 horses, 2 of them too old to work hard. 2 milk cows. Chickens have gone feral living in the rafters. Haven't had eggs in a month. I walked deeper into the barn, running my hand along a stall door. The wood was good, just needed mending. The whole structure needed mucking and repair, but the bones were solid. Everything here was salvageable if someone cared enough to do the work. I turned to face her. "What do you want, Sarah?" She looked confused. "What? What do you want? Not what Mother Agnes wants. Not what the church says you should want. Not what those 42 cowards thought you should settle for. What do you want?" The question seemed to stun her. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I watched emotions flicker across her face. Confusion, suspicion, then something that looked like pain. No one's ever asked me that before. I'm asking now. She stood there, this massive woman in a too small barn, and for a long moment she just stared at her hands. Those huge, scarred, capable hands that the church had called weapons of Satan. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet, I had to step closer to hear. "I want to stop being afraid. I want to wake up one morning without wondering if today's the day someone decides I'm too dangerous to let live. I want to walk through town without children screaming or women clutching their husbands like I might steal them away." Her voice grew stronger, anger bleeding into it. "I want to use this body, this cursed, impossible body, for something good instead of just surviving. I want to build something, create something, matter to someone." She stopped, looked away. "Say it," I pressed gently. "Whatever you're holding back, say it. I want to be loved." The words came out in a whisper like a confession of murder. "I want someone to look at me the way my father looked at my mother before they died. I want to be touched without fear. I want to be wanted, not needed for my strength or accepted out of pity, but actually wanted." Her voice broke. "But that's fantasy. That's a fairy tale for someone like me." I closed the distance between us. She tensed immediately, her entire body going rigid, like she expected violence. I stopped inches away, had to tilt my head back to meet her eyes. Close enough to smell sage and sweat on her skin. Close enough that she could crush me with one hand if she chose to. "It's not fantasy," I said quietly. "It's what every human being deserves. And for the next 30 days, I'm going to prove it to you." Slowly giving her every chance to pull away, I reached up and took her hand. Her massive fingers dwarfed mine, rough with calluses, marked with old scars. But her touch was gentle, impossibly gentle for hands that could break stone. "I'm going to show you what it means to be courted proper, to be valued, to be respected, to be wanted. And at the end of 30 days, if you still don't believe me, if you want to send me away, I'll go. No questions, no debt." I squeezed her hand. "But right now I need you to hear this. You are not cursed. You are not too much. You are extraordinary. And any man who can't see that is a coward and a fool." A sound escaped her throat, something between a bottom and a laugh, completely broken. Then she did something that shocked us both. She dropped to her knees, bringing herself down to my height, and wrapped her massive arms around me. And she broke. 28 years of rejection and cruelty and loneliness poured out in great heaving sobs that shook her entire frame. She cried into my shoulder, her tears soaking through my shirt, her body trembling like a tree in a storm. I held her. My arms barely reached around her broad back, but I held on anyway. I didn't tell her to stop. Didn't say it was okay when it clearly wasn't. I just held her and let her shatter, because sometimes breaking apart is the only way to start putting yourself back together. "I'm scared," she whispered against my neck. "So scared this is a dream. That I'll wake up tomorrow and you'll begin and it'll be worse than before because I let myself hope." "I'm scared too," I admitted. "Scared I'll fail you. Scared I'm not good enough. Scared I'll say the wrong thing and hurt you worse than those 42 men did." I pulled back just enough to look at her tear-stained face. "But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere, not for 30 days. Not ever if you'll have me." She stared at me like I was speaking a language she'd never heard before. Then slowly, carefully, she reached up and touched my face. Her massive palm covered my entire cheek, her thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't realized I'd shed. Her touch was impossibly gentle. The touch of someone who'd learned to control strength out of necessity, who knew exactly how much force would break bone and made certain to use a fraction of it. "You're real," she whispered like she was testing the words. "I'm real," I confirmed. Mother Agnes's voice rang out from the main building, calling us to supper. Sarah and I walked back hand in hand, her massive palm completely engulfing mine. In the refectory, a sparse table waited. Beans that had been cooked too long, cornbread that was more corn than bread, weak tea that had probably been used twice already. Two other nuns sat at the table, both ancient. Mother Agnes introduced them as Sister Dorothy and Sister Ruth, both well past 70, both who'd refused to abandon Sarah when the excommunication came down. "Mr. Mackenzie," Mother Agnes said, her voice trembling with emotion she was trying to control. "The guest cell is small. It was meant for visiting priests, not for men of your—" She paused, "your occupation. But it's clean and it's yours for as long as you'll stay. I appreciate that, ma'am. Tomorrow I'll start on the barn, get those stalls mucked out, fix what needs fixing, see what can be salvaged." I looked at Sarah. "If you're willing to teach me how you've been managing the livestock, maybe we can work together. Pool our knowledge, your strength and my skill." Her eyes widened. "You want me to work with you?" "I need you to work with me," I corrected. "I'm one man with a bum shoulder and debts of my own. You're stronger than any 3 ranch hands I could hire. Why wouldn't I want you beside me?" The look on her face told me everything. No one had ever wanted her beside them. No one had ever asked for her partnership rather than her servitude. "I'd like that," she said softly. "I'd like that very much." After supper, Mother Agnes showed me to the guest cell. It was exactly as advertised. Small, barely wide enough for the narrow cot and a small table. A crucifix hung on the wall, the only decoration. The window didn't quite close all the way, letting in the evening breeze and the sound of crickets. But the quilt on the bed looked hand-stitched with care, and there was a basin of clean water waiting for me to wash. "Thank you," I said to Mother Agnes, "for giving me this chance." The old woman's eyes filled with tears. She reached up, had to reach up, even though I wasn't particularly tall, and cupped my face with her weathered hands. "No, Mr. Mackenzie. Thank you. Thank you for seeing my daughter. Really seeing her, not what she looks like or what the church says about her, but who she actually is." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Please don't break her heart. It's already been broken so many times. I don't think it could survive another shattering." "I won't," I promised. "I swear to you I won't." I lay on the narrow cot and stared at the ceiling. What the hell had I committed myself to? Not just marriage, but potentially fathering a child within 18 months to save church property from being seized. The same church that had tortured Sarah. The same church that had refused Anna her last rites. But then I thought about Sarah's breakdown in the barn, the way she'd held on to me like I was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. The sound of hope trying to come back to life in her voice when I'd said I wanted her beside me. Anna's voice echoed in my memory. "Don't let anyone suffer alone." For the first time in 4 years, I fell asleep without hearing Anna's screams. Instead, I dreamed of a woman with winter sky eyes and hands that could break stone but chose gentleness. The sound of wood splitting woke me before dawn. Not careful strikes, but powerful cracks that echoed like thunder across the valley. I dressed quickly and stepped outside to find Sarah with an axe, bringing it down with such force that entire logs exploded into perfect pieces. She'd been at it for hours. I could tell by the mountain of split wood stacked beside her, by the sweat soaking through her dress, despite the morning chill, by the determined set of her jaw. "Sarah," I called out. She stopped mid-swing, turned, "Didn't want to wake you. Figured I'd get started on winter supplies." I walked closer, surveying the pile. That's enough wood to last 3 winters. Wanted to be useful. The fear underneath was plain as day. The terror that if she wasn't constantly proving her worth, I'd leave like everyone else. "You don't have to earn your place here," I said gently. "This is your home, is it?" Her voice cracked. "The church says I have no right to be here. That only marriage and an heir can keep me from being cast out completely. That I'm squatting on church property, living on borrowed time." She threw the axe down. It embedded deep into the stump with a sound like a bone breaking. "Do you understand what they're asking, Silas? 18 months to conceive or lose everything. They're treating me like breeding stock, like my only value is my ability to produce a child." "You're right," I said. "It is degrading. But here's the difference between me and those 42 cowards. I'm not here to fulfill church requirements. I'm here to court you, to know you, to let you decide if you want me. And if after 30 days you send me away, the church can have their land, because I will not be part of treating you like property. We spent that first full day working side by side. I showed her efficient techniques for mucking stalls, things I'd learned from Crow Indians during my years in the mountains. Layer pine needles under the straw, create a composting system that turns waste into fertilizer for gardens. She watched with intense focus, asking questions, absorbing everything. When we moved to repairing the barn roof, she lifted beams I couldn't budge alone. I showed her proper joinery, how to cut a mortise and tenon that would hold for generations without nails. Father Hayes said women shouldn't learn carpentry, she said, holding a beam steady while I worked. Said it was unwomanly. Father Hayes is an idiot, I said bluntly. Skill has no gender, just practice and patience. I saw pride bloom across her face, maybe the first time anyone had praised her for learning, rather than condemned her for trying. That evening, I took her into the forest, taught her tracking, how to read sign, how to move silently through underbrush. She was a natural, her size irrelevant, when she understood how to use terrain. When we found a deer trail, I handed her my rifle. You take the shot, I whispered. I've never fired a gun before. Time to learn. She shouldered the rifle, her hands steady, her breathing controlled. When the doe appeared, Sarah squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out clean. The deer dropped instantly, no suffering. Perfect shot, I said, genuinely impressed. You're a natural marksman. The smile that crossed her face could have lit the entire valley. Over the next few days, we fell into a rhythm. Mornings working the land together, afternoons repairing buildings and learning each other's skills, evenings sitting on the porch talking. On the second evening, Sarah asked about Anna. She was strong, I said, staring at the mountains. Not physically like you, but spiritually. When we lost our first baby, she miscarried at 5 months. She grieved hard but didn't break. Said we'd try again, God willing. That strength sustained me until the end. On the third evening, I asked about her parents. Father was a blacksmith, she said. Mother was a midwife. They died in a typhoid outbreak when I was 14. Father Hayes said the convent would care for me, so I took vows. Not because I felt called by God, but because I had nowhere else to go. On the fourth evening, Sarah asked if I missed the mountains. Every day, I admitted, but I'm starting to think maybe I hid up there too long. Used grief as an excuse to avoid living. On the fifth day, Mother Agnes announced we needed supplies from Copper Ridge. Sarah's face went pale. I can't go back there, she said, not after being paraded through the street like livestock. You're not going alone, I said firmly. We go together, we face them together. The walk down Main Street felt like running a gauntlet. It was market day, the street crowded with people buying and selling and gossiping. The moment Sarah and I appeared together, silence fell like a hammer. We walked down the center of the street, her towering over me, our shoulders touching. The whispers started immediately. That's the demon nun. Can't believe Mackenzie's actually courting her. I heard she can break a man's back like a dry twig. Sarah's breathing quickened. I took her hand and squeezed. Eyes forward, I murmured. Don't give them power. We reached Miller's General Store. Jacob Miller stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face set in hard lines. We ain't serving her kind, he said. My voice came out cold and controlled. Her kind, you mean women, former nuns, people who defended themselves from rape. Which specific kind are you refusing to serve, Jacob? I mean demon-touched freaks who got no business in civilized society. I stepped forward until I was inches from his face. Jacob, you remember 4 years ago when Anna was dying, when I couldn't pay for supplies because all my money went to trying to save her? You extended us credit, showed mercy to strangers in need. What happened to that man? Jacob shifted uncomfortably. Sarah Brennan defended a 16-year-old girl from being raped, used her God-given strength to protect the helpless. And the church punished her for it, tortured her for 5 days, cast her out. If you call her a freak again, you're saying protecting the innocent is freakish. That strength used for good is evil, and I won't let that stand. The street had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching. Jacob looked at Sarah, really looked at her, saw the fear in her eyes, the way she was trying to make herself smaller, the resignation on her face like she'd already accepted his rejection. Something shifted in his expression. Your money's good here, Mr. Mackenzie. Miss Brennan, It was a small victory, but it was a victory. Inside the store, an older woman approached. Clara Henshaw, a widow I'd traded with before. "Miss Brennan," she said quietly, "I want to apologize. My grandson threw stones at you last month when you came for supplies. I switched him good for it and made him memorize scripture about kindness to strangers." She pressed a bundle into Sarah's hands. "This was my late husband's Sunday shirt. Too big for anyone else in town. Quality fabric. I think he'd want you to have it. You can make it into a dress." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Why?" "Because I know what it's like to be judged for things you can't control," Clara said. "I was barren for 20 years before Henry died. Town called me cursed, said God was punishing me for secret sins. Then I adopted 7 orphans nobody else wanted. Sometimes God's ways aren't the church's ways. When we left the store, we found our mule limping. Someone had cut the saddle girth halfway through. It would have snapped during the ride home, throwing us both. Across the street stood Clayton Voss, a land speculator I recognized from previous trips to town. He was smirking. Beside him stood a well-dressed man I didn't know. "Sarah," the man called out, "we need to talk about your inheritance." We walked over. The man was in his 50s, expensive suit, cold eyes that assessed value in everything they saw. "I'm Jacob Brennan," he said, "Sarah's uncle, her only living blood relative." Sarah's voice went cold. "The uncle who disowned me when I took my vows. Said I was dead to the family." That Uncle Jacob Brennan's face hardened. "This charade has gone on long enough, Sarah. You're not fit to manage property. Father Hayes and I have come to an agreement. You'll sign over power of attorney to me. I'll manage the convent land, ensure it's used properly. You'll be cared for in an appropriate facility." "An asylum," Sarah said flatly. "You want to declare me insane and lock me away. It's for your own good. You killed a man, Sarah. You're dangerous, unpredictable, and now you're fornicating with this mountain savage." My fist started to cock back instinctively. Sarah's massive hand caught my wrist, gentle but immovable. "Don't," she said quietly. "He's not worth it." She turned to her uncle. "Jacob, you disowned me 12 years ago. Didn't come to my vows ceremony. Didn't write once in all that time. Now you want control of my inheritance. You can go straight to hell." We walked away. Behind us, Jacob shouted, "You have 30 days, Sarah. Then Father Hayes files a competency hearing, and you'll lose everything." Back at the convent, Sarah paced the refectory like a caged animal. "They're going to take it," she said. "The land, the buildings, everything." "A competency hearing, I can't win that. Not against Father Hayes and my uncle's money." "Yes, you can," I said firmly. "We'll get witnesses, character testimonials, proof you're managing the land competently." "From who? The town that calls me demon, the church that excommunicated me." I took her hands. "From me, from Mother Agnes, from Clara Henshaw, from every person whose life you've touched. We'll find them, and if that's not enough, then we fight dirty," I said. "But we fight together." On the 8th day, my trapping partner, Marcus Webb, rode in. He'd lost his left leg below the knee in a bear attack 5 years back, wore a wooden prosthetic that gave him a rolling gait. 45 years old, grizzled as they come, but with kind eyes. "Silas," he called out, "heard you recording, had to see with my own eyes the woman who could make you come down from the mountain." He met Sarah without a flicker of fear or disgust. "Ma'am, pleasure to meet you. Silas wrote me about you in his last letter. Described you as the strongest and most fascinating woman he had ever met. Didn't mention you were also beautiful." Sarah flushed red, probably the first time anyone had called her beautiful in her entire life. Marcus and I spent the morning setting up a demonstration trap line for Sarah. I showed her the 3 main types of sets: dirt hole for fox and coyote, water set for beaver and mink, cubby set for marten. She absorbed everything like a sponge soaking water. "How much can you make in a season?" "Good trapper pulls $400 to $500 in pelts per winter," Marcus said. "Silas here averages 600 because he works harder than 3 men combined and knows the mountains like his own heartbeat." "Could I learn?" Sarah asked hesitantly. "With your strength and patience," I said, "you'd make a fortune. Double my haul easily." I watched the idea take root in her mind, a way to generate income independent of church requirements, a path to self-sufficiency. Over the next few days, we built infrastructure, installed a water system so the kitchen had running water for the first time. Repaired the chapel bell tower, Sarah climbing with ropes, while I supervised from below. Built a smokehouse for preserving meat. Each project I taught her the why behind the how. Why alderwood for fish and hickory for red meat. Why proper ventilation matters in a smokehouse. Why certain knots hold under load and others slip. She didn't just learn the skills, she learned the philosophy. Do things right, not fast, quality over quantity, pride in craftsmanship. On the 11th night, we sat on the porch watching stars emerge. Sarah spoke suddenly. Silas, have you thought about the 18-month requirement every day? I admitted. And and I think the church's timeline is complete horseshit, I said bluntly. They're treating you like breeding stock, setting arbitrary deadlines. It's degrading. But if we don't comply, we lose the land. I turned to face her fully. Sarah, when if we come together as husband and wife, it'll be because we both want it, because we're ready, not because some priest says we have to perform on schedule. What if I'm never ready? She whispered. What if I'm too broken? Too afraid. I took her hand. Then we'll find other ways to be intimate, talking, working together, building a life side by side. Physical intimacy isn't the only form of closeness that matters, but the air requirement. We have 18 months, I said. That's a year and a half. We don't have to decide tonight or next week or even next month. We take our time, learn each other, trust that when the moment's right, we'll both know. She stared at me with something like wonder. You're not like any man I've ever known. Good, I said, because you're not like any woman I've ever known. We're both outliers, might as well be outliers together. On the 12th day, a visitor arrived. Doctora Emilia Cross, 50 years old, one of the rare female frontier doctors, weathered face, sharp, intelligent eyes, medical bag always within reach. Mother Agnes sent word you needed medical consultation, she said to Sarah, about potential pregnancy complications given your unusual physiology. Sarah tensed. I'm not pregnant, not yet. But if the church requires an heir within 18 months, we should discuss medical realities. In private, Doc Amelia examined Sarah. When she emerged an hour later, she asked to speak with me alone. Sarah's physiology is remarkable, Doc Amelia said. Bone density 40% higher than normal. Muscle mass equivalent to a large male, but her reproductive system appears entirely normal. She can conceive and carry a child. Will childbirth be dangerous? I asked, my stomach tight with fear. Less dangerous than for smaller women, actually. Her pelvis is proportionally wider. Her muscle strength will aid labor. The biggest risk is if the baby inherits her size, which could result in longer labor, but not necessarily life-threatening with the proper medical attendance. Relief flooded through me. So she can do this safely, physically? Yes. Doc Amelia's eyes sharpened. Emotionally, that woman has been tortured, violated, told she's demon spawned for 28 years. She's terrified of intimacy, of her own body, of being vulnerable. You'll need patience, gentleness, time. I'll give her whatever she needs. Doc Amelia studied me for a long moment. You really love her. More than my own life, I said, and knew it was true. Then you're the right man for this. Most would have run by now. On the 13th day, I packed a lunch and led Sarah to a creek on the property. Spread a blanket, laid out food. What's this? She asked, suspicious. Courting, I said. Proper courting involves romance, not just work. So we're having a picnic. We ate and talked and waded in the cold creek water. Sarah laughed, a full, booming laugh that echoed off the valley walls when I slipped on moss-covered rocks and fell into the water fully clothed. You look ridiculous, she said, giggling like a child. Then join me, I said, and splashed her. She hesitated only a second before jumping in. The splash was like a boulder hitting the water. We played like children, laughing and splashing, and for the first time in both our lives, we were simply happy. Later, sitting on the bank drying in the sun, Sarah spoke quietly. I haven't felt this light in years, maybe ever. Good, I said. You deserve lightness. Sure. All the things you've been denied. On the 14th evening, we sat on the porch in comfortable silence. Sarah was braiding rope while I taught her sailor's knots. Our hands worked together, fingers brushing with each pass of the rope. Your hands are beautiful, I said. She scoffed. They're huge, scarred, ugly. They're strong, I corrected. Capable. They've built things, protected people, healed wounds. That's beautiful. The silence that followed felt heavy with possibility. Then Sarah set down the rope, leaned down, and cupped my face with those massive, gentle hands, and kissed me. It was tentative, uncertain, the first kiss of her 28 years on Earth. When we broke apart, we were both crying. "Was that okay?" she whispered. "That was perfect," I said. On the 15th day, the sheriff wrote in with an official document, a competency hearing. Sarah Brennan versus the Diocese of Montana, scheduled for day 30, the exact day our courtship period was supposed to end. Father Donovan Hayes was listed as plaintiff, claiming Sarah was mentally and morally unfit to manage property. If the church won the land, would revert immediately. Marriage wouldn't matter. Sarah read the notice, hands trembling. They timed it perfectly. Day 30, when I'm supposed to decide if I'll marry you. Now it doesn't matter what I decide. They'll take everything anyway. Not if we fight, I said. How they have lawyers, money, church authority. We have nothing. I pulled her close. We have truth. We have witnesses. We have each other. That's not nothing. But inside I was worried. This was a bigger fight than I'd anticipated. Over the next week we prepared. Mother Agnes, Doc Amelia Marcus, Clara Henshaw. Sarah and I gathered around the refectory table to plan our strategy. We need to prove 3 things, Doc Amelia said. Mental competence, moral character, ability to manage property. We made lists. Doc Amelia could testify about Sarah's cognitive function. Mother Agnes about 12 years of sound judgment. We needed witnesses to the rape incident showing Sarah's response was justified. For property management, we had account books showing the convent's improved condition, proof of the infrastructure improvements we'd made in just 2 weeks. But Marcus identified the real problem. We're playing defense. Bad strategy. We should attack. Attack how Sarah asked. Investigate Father Hayes. A man that determined to seize land usually has a financial stake. Find out who's really behind this. Over the next several days, Marcus dug through records in the Copper Ridge Courthouse, talked to clerks in saloons, pieced together a picture. On the 19th day, he returned with documents. Father Hayes is Clayton Voss's cousin, Marcus said, spreading papers on the table. They have a partnership agreement. Church seizes the land, sells it to Voss for development. Hayes gets 40% commission. It's fraud, using church authority for personal profit. It's also illegal, Doc Amelia added. If we can prove it. We can, Marcus said. I have land deeds partnership agreements, witness statements from the county clerk. But exposing this makes dangerous enemies. Church hierarchy, Voss family territorial officials in their pockets. We win this hearing, we better be ready for consequences. Sarah and I spent the next 3 days riding to neighboring homesteads, convincing people to testify. Mrs. Patterson, whose baby Sarah had delivered during a blizzard when Doc Amelia couldn't get through. Old Man Garrett, whose barn Sarah had helped rebuild after a lightning fire. Sister Margaret, now 19, terrified, but willing to testify about the rape Sarah had stopped. By the 23rd day, we had 12 witnesses. That night, Sarah and I were alone in the barn, our private space away from the others. She spoke suddenly. Silas, I want to try. Try what? Being close. Physically. I'm scared, but I trust you. And if we're going to marry, if we survive this hearing, I want to know what it's like to be wanted, to be touched without fear. My heart pounded. Sarah, we don't have to rush anything. I know, but I want to. Not because of the church deadline, because of you, because I choose this. We didn't go all the way, but we explored kissing and touching and learning the landscape of each other's bodies. Slowly, gently, with constant communication and care. Afterwards, Sarah cried, not from pain, but from the release of years of accumulated shame. Thank you, she whispered, for making me feel human. You are human, I said fiercely, the most human person I know. On the 24th day, Jacob Brennan and Clayton Voss ambushed us at the convent gate. We're giving you one last chance, Sarah Jacob said. Sign power of attorney. We'll drop the hearing. You can stay here as a resident under supervision. Supervised care facility, Voss corrected smoothly. You'd be comfortable. You mean an asylum, Sarah said. If you refuse, Jacob's voice turned cold at that hearing, we'll parade every violent incident, every broken object, every person you've scared. We'll bring in the dead man's family. They'll testify you murdered him in cold blood. We'll prove you're dangerous, Voss added, unstable. Judge Morrison will have no choice but to declare you incompetent. Then you lose everything and get committed anyway. Plus, Jacob said, turning to me, we'll investigate Mr. Mackenzie. Heard he's been living off-grid for years. No property taxes paid. No legal registration. Could have him arrested for vagrancy trespassing on federal land. You'd destroy us both, Sarah whispered. If necessary, Jacob said coldly. This is business, Sarah. Nothing personal. They rode away, leaving us standing in the dust. Then we go nuclear, I said grimly. What we expose Hayes and Voss's fraud, take it to the territorial governor if we have to. Burn it all down before we let them win. Mother Agnes, who had overheard, stepped forward. If you expose the fraud, you'll make enemies of the entire church hierarchy in Montana. They'll come after both of you. Excommunicate you, Silas. Charge you with slander. Better than watching them destroy Sarah, I said. Sarah took my hand. Silas, you'd risk everything, your soul, your freedom for you in a heartbeat. She kissed me then, hard and desperate and full of everything we couldn't say with words. Then let's fight, she said. Together. 5 days until the hearing. 5 days to prepare for the fight of our lives. 5 days until we'd know if love and truth were enough to stand against power and corruption. We spent those days gathering final evidence, rehearsing testimony, preparing for every argument Father Hayes might make. At night, Sarah and I sat together on the porch, not talking, just being present with each other. On the 29th night, the night before the hearing, Sarah spoke into the darkness. No matter what happens tomorrow, I want you to know something. These 30 days with you have been the happiest of my life. You gave me something I thought I'd never have. Hope. The belief that maybe I'm not broken, that maybe I deserve good things. If we lose tomorrow, if they take everything, I won't regret saying yes to you. I won't regret any of it. I pulled her close. We're not going to lose because we have something they don't. We have truth. And truth is stronger than lies, even when the liars have money and power. I hope you're right, she whispered. So do I. I thought, so do I. The morning of the 30th day arrived with the weight of inevitability. Dawn broke cold and clear over the Bitterroot Mountains, the kind of crystalline morning that made every detail sharp enough to cut. Sarah and I stood together on the convent porch, watching the sun climb, and knowing that by nightfall everything would be decided. She wore the dress Clara Henshaw had given her, made from her late husband's Sunday shirt. The fabric was quality cotton, deep blue, like a mountain lake, and it fit Sarah better than anything I'd seen her wear. Her hair was braided and pinned up, revealing the strong lines of her neck and jaw. She looked like what she was, a warrior preparing for battle. Are you ready? I asked. No, she said honestly, but I'm going anyway. We rode into Copper Ridge in Mother Agnes's wagon, the old nun driving with sisters Dorothy and Ruth in the back. Marcus Webb rode alongside on his horse, his wooden legs strapped tight. Doc Amelia had gone ahead the night before to ensure she'd have a place to stay and wouldn't be turned away by boarding houses that didn't take kindly to female doctors. The town hall had been converted into a makeshift courtroom. By the time we arrived at 9 in the morning, over 200 people had already crowded inside and spilled out onto the street. This was the entertainment event of the season. The demon nun on trial, the hermit trapper defending her, the church bringing down its authority. We pushed through the crowd. People parted, some with hostility, some with curiosity, a few with what might have been sympathy. Sarah kept her eyes forward, her jaw set, her massive hands clenched at her sides. Inside the room had been arranged to maximize the church's advantage. At the front, behind a raised table, sat territorial Judge Amos Pritchard, a man of 67 with iron gray hair and a reputation for fairness tempered by deep religious conviction. To his right sat the court recorder, a nervous young man with ink-stained fingers. In the front row on the right side sat Father Donovan Hayes, 45 years old, well-fed and prosperous-looking in his clerical robes. Beside him sat 2 lawyers in expensive suits, clearly brought in from Helena or even farther. Next to them, Clayton Voss and Jacob Brennan, both looking confident and well pleased with themselves. The left side of the room, our side, looked sparse by comparison. Mother Agnes' sisters Dorothy and Ruth Marcus Webb, Doc Amelia Clara Henshaw, and the handful of witnesses we'd managed to gather. Maybe 20 people total against the might of the church. Sarah and I sat at the defendant's table. I reached under the table and took her hand. She was shaking. Look at me, I said quietly. She turned those winter sky eyes on me. No matter what they say today, no matter what poison they spill, remember who you really are. You're not demon-possessed. You're not dangerous. You're the woman who saved a girl from rape, who works harder than any three people, who's been courted properly for 30 days and proven herself worthy of love and respect. Hold on to that. Don't let them take it from you. She squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. Thank you. Judge Pritchard banged his gavel. The room fell silent. This tribunal is called to determine the mental and spiritual fitnesses of Sarah Brennan, formerly Sister Sarah of the Convent of the Sacred Heart, to inherit and manage church property as specified in the last will and testament of the late Mother Superior, Margaret Callahan. He looked directly at Sarah. Miss Brennan, do you understand the charges brought against you? Her voice came out steady, stronger than I'd expected. I understand the church claims I'm mentally deficient, violently unstable, and spiritually corrupt. I understand they want to take the land my community has stewarded for 70 years. Yes, Your Honor, I understand perfectly. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Judge Pritchard's eyebrow raised slightly. You may not editorialize, Miss Brennan. Do you understand you stand accused of mental incapacity, violent tendencies, and moral corruption, sufficient to render you unfit to manage property or assets? I understand those are the accusations, Sarah said clearly. I deny them completely. Then we proceed. The church will present its case first. Father Hayes's lead lawyer stood. His name was Edmund Pierce, a sharp-featured man of about 40, with cold eyes and a voice trained to carry. He began with an opening statement designed to poison the well. Your Honor, members of this community serving as observers, we are here today because the church has a solemn duty to protect its assets and ensure they are managed by persons of sound mind and moral character. Miss Sarah Brennan, despite her years of service to the convent, has demonstrated through repeated incidents of violence, abnormal physical characteristics, and resistance to holy authority that she is unsuited to this responsibility. He paced before the judge's bench. We will demonstrate that Miss Brennan possesses unnatural strength, that she has used to kill one man and injure others, that she has resisted the church's attempts to provide spiritual healing for what can only be described as demonic influence, that she has entered into an improper relationship with a man of questionable character, and that allowing her to control 800 acres of prime Montana land would be a dereliction of the church's sacred duty. He sat down with the satisfaction of a man who believes he's already won. Mr. Pierce, you may call your first witness. The church calls Dr. Howard Mills. The town doctor took the stand, a nervous man in his 50s who wouldn't meet Sarah's eyes. Edmund Pierce led him through testimony clearly rehearsed. Dr. Mills, you examined Miss Brennan during the exorcism performed in the spring of last year. What were your medical findings? Well, she displayed abnormal physical strength. When restrained with iron shackles meant to hold grown men, she broke them. She showed resistance to pain that suggested he paused unnatural endurance. Would you say her strength is normal for a woman? No, sir. It's highly abnormal, beyond anything in my medical experience. Could such abnormal strength be evidence of supernatural influence? Mills shifted uncomfortably. The church believes it could be. You also treated the man Miss Brennan killed. Describe his injuries. Broken neck, fractured skull. The force required would be equivalent to a fall from a significant height or being kicked by a horse. Yet Miss Brennan delivered this force with her bare hands. Pierce turned to face the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we're told this was self-defense. But what woman possesses the strength to snap a man's neck like a dry branch? What natural woman can kill with the ease of a predator? Mother Agnes stood up, her voice cutting through the room. Objection. Dr. Mills is not qualified to diagnose supernatural possession. He's a medical doctor, not a theologian. Judge Pritchard nodded. Sustained. Mr. Pierce, confine your questions to medical observations. Pierce nodded smoothly, unbothered. No further questions. I leaned over to Mother Agnes, who was serving as Sarah's legal representative, since we couldn't afford a real lawyer. Your turn. Mother Agnes approached the witness stand with the slow deliberation of age. Dr. Mills, how long did you observe Miss Brennan during this so-called exorcism? 5 days. And during those 5 days, was she given adequate food? Mills looked down. The protocol for exorcism requires fasting to weaken demonic influence. That's not what I asked. Was she given adequate food? Yes or no? No. Was she given adequate water? Minimal water twice daily. Dr. Mills, in your medical opinion, what happens to a human being deprived of adequate food and water for 5 days? They become dehydrated. Weak, cognitive function can be impaired. In extreme cases, there can be hallucinations, organ damage. And if such a person were also being beaten with rods, as you documented in your medical notes, what would their physical and mental state be? Mill's voice dropped to barely audible. Extreme distress, pain, possible delirium. So when Miss Brennan broke those shackles on the fifth day, could it have been the result of adrenaline from a survival instinct rather than demonic strength? Mills hesitated. It's possible. No further questions. Pierce called his next witness, Father Bernard, one of the priests who'd participated in the exorcism. He was a true believer, his testimony full of righteous conviction. Describe Miss Brennan's behavior during the exorcism. She resisted the holy water, screamed when scripture was read, cursed us, used language unbecoming any woman, let alone a nun. On the fifth day, she broke free of blessed restraints with unholy strength. What did she say when she cursed you, Father? Bernard's face reddened. She said, and I quote, "You're torturing me. This isn't God's will. You're sadists hiding behind scripture." Gasps from the crowd. Pierce nodded with satisfaction. And you interpreted this as demonic resistance to holy intervention. But Mother Agnes was ready for cross-examination. Father Bernard, you testified that Miss Brennan was restrained for 5 days. Where exactly was she restrained? In the chapel basement. Chained to what? A chair, iron chair bolted to the floor. And during these 5 days, did you personally strike Miss Brennan with a rod? Yes. When she resisted prayer. How many times? I didn't count. Many times. Mother Agnes produced a document. This is Dr. Mills's medical report from the examination after the exorcism. He documented 63 separate wounds from rod strikes. 63 times you beat a starving, dehydrated woman. Is that God's will, Father Bernard? We were following established protocol for driving out demons. Protocol established by whom? Mother Agnes's voice rose. By the same church that burned women as witches, that tortured confessions from innocent people, that has a long and documented history of calling anything it doesn't understand demonic. Judge Pritchard banged his gavel. Miss Agnes, you will refrain from historical commentary. Stick to the facts of this case. But the seed was planted. I could see it in the faces of some observers. Doubt creeping in. Pierce called several more witnesses, townspeople who testified to Sarah's frightening size and strength. The family of the man she'd killed, who painted her as a murderess who'd attacked their son without provocation. A priest who testified that her excommunication was justified and proper according to church law. Each witness was chipped away at Sarah's character, building a picture of a dangerous, unstable woman, unsuited to managing anything, let alone valuable land. Then Pierce played his final card. I call Sister Anne-Marie Dutton. The room went silent. This was unexpected. Sister Anne-Marie was the girl Sarah had saved from rape. Why would she testify against her defender? Anne-Marie entered small and fragile at 19, her nun's habit marking her as still part of the church. She wouldn't look at Sarah as she took the stand. Sister Anne-Marie Pierce began gently. You were present during the incident that led to Miss Brennan's excommunication. Please describe what happened. Anne-Marie's voice was barely audible. A man broke into the chapel. He grabbed me, put a knife to my throat, started to assault me, and then Sister Sarah heard me scream. She ran in. She grabbed him and threw him off me. He hit the altar. I heard bones break. Did Sister Sarah check on your welfare first, or did she immediately attack the man? Anne-Marie's voice shook. She immediately grabbed him. So her first instinct was violence, not care for you. I object, Mother, Agnes called, leading the witness. Sustained, Judge Pritchard said. Rephrase. Pierce smiled. Sister Anne-Marie, after the man was injured, what did Sister Sarah do? She stood over him. She was shaking. Her fists were clenched. I thought she was going to kill him right there. Did she say anything? Anne-Marie nodded, tears streaming. She said, if you ever touch another woman, I'll break more than your bones. Then she looked at me and asked if I was hurt. So she threatened further violence before checking on your condition. Yes. Pierce turned to the room with a gesture of triumph. This sounds like rage, not protection. Uncontrolled violence, not measured defense. He sat down. The damage was done. Even the girl Sarah saved was testifying against her. Mother Agnes approached the witness stand slowly. Sister Anne Marie, I have just one question. In your honest assessment, did Sister Sarah Brennan save your life that night? Anne Marie's head snapped up. She looked directly at Mother Agnes for the first time, and I saw something change in her eyes. Yes, she said clearly. Can you elaborate? Anne Marie's voice grew stronger. Mr. Pierce is trying to make it sound like Sister Sarah was violent without cause. But that man had a knife to my throat. He'd already torn my habit. He was seconds away from raping me. She stood up trembling, but determined. Sister Sarah didn't attack him. She saved me. And yes, she broke his bones. But he broke into our home. He attacked a defenseless woman. He deserved worse. Pierce tried to interrupt. Sister Anne Marie, you're out of turn. I'm not finished. Her voice cracked like a whip. The church excommunicated Sister Sarah for using excessive force. But what's the right amount of force to stop a rape? Should she have politely asked him to leave, prayed while he violated me? She turned to Father Hayes, her eyes blazing. You punished the woman who saved my life. You tortured her for 5 days, called her demon-possessed. Threw her out. But the man who attacked me, you let him go. Didn't press charges. Didn't even ban him from church grounds. Her voice dropped to a fierce whisper. Because he was a man. And she's a woman who's too big, too strong, too much. And that terrifies you more than rape does. The courtroom erupted. Judge Pritchard banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Anne Marie walked from the witness stand directly to our table and took Sarah's hand. I should have testified for you months ago. I was too afraid. But I'm not afraid anymore. She looked at the judge. Magdalene Brennan saved my life and my virtue. If you declare her unfit, you're saying women have no right to defend themselves or others. You're saying the church values male comfort over female safety. She sat down beside Sarah, still holding her hand. The crowd was in chaos, half shouting support, half shouting condemnation. Judge Pritchard finally restored order. We'll take a 30-minute recess. When we return, the defense will present its case. Outside during the recess, Sarah was crying. I never thought Anne Marie would stand up for me. She always avoided me after the excommunication. Anne Marie squeezed her hand. I blame myself for being weak, for needing rescue, for getting you excommunicated. But I'm done being weak. If you can stand up to them, so can I. When court reconvened, Mother Agnes called our witnesses one by one. Clara Henshaw testified about the town's cruel treatment of Sarah and how Sarah never retaliated despite having the strength to crush anyone who mocked her. If she's violent and unstable, why didn't she hurt the children who threw stones? She could have. But she has more self-control than anyone I've ever known. Robert Cole, the blacksmith, testified about Sarah running into a burning barn 3 years ago to save a child and livestock while grown men stood outside saying it was too dangerous. That's not demon behavior. That's angel behavior. Doc Amelia presented medical evidence. I've examined Miss Brennan thoroughly. Her size and strength result from genetic variations in bone density and muscle composition. Rare, yes, but entirely biological. She's not possessed. She's a statistical anomaly. Unusual, but completely human. Then Marcus Webb took the stand. I testified about meeting Sarah and seeing immediately that she was a woman of sound mind, strong character, and remarkable capability. I described the 30 days of courtship, her patience teaching me about farming and animal husbandry, her intelligence learning trapping and wilderness skills, her gentleness with the orphans at the convent, her tireless work ethic improving infrastructure. She's not violent, I said directly to Judge Pritchard. She's controlled. She could have killed that rapist slowly. She didn't. She could have crushed anyone who mocked her. She didn't. She uses her strength to protect the weak, not to terrorize them. My voice grew passionate. The church says she's unfit. I say she's the most fit person I've ever known. She's survived torture, excommunication, years of abuse, and she's still standing, still kind, still willing to hope. That's not mental deficiency. That's extraordinary resilience. Finally, Mother Agnes called Sarah herself to the stand. Sarah stood and walked to the witness box. At her full height, she towered over everyone in the room. The visual was striking. This massive woman, powerful enough to break bones, standing alone against the collective weight of church and society. Mother Agnes approached gently. Sarah, why should this court declare you mentally fit? Sarah was silent for a long moment. The room waited. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady. I don't know if I should. Maybe the church is right. Maybe I am defective. Gasps rippled through observers. I felt panic rise in my chest. What was she doing? Look at me, she continued. I'm 6'7". I weigh 230 pounds. I can break a man's arm without trying. I terrify children just by existing. I make grown men uncomfortable by walking past them. Father Hayes was smiling now, thinking she was confessing. But here's what I've learned in 30 days with Silas Mackenzie. Being different doesn't mean being defective. Her voice grew stronger. The church taught me to hate my body, to see my size as punishment, my strength as curse. They taught me to make myself small, quiet, apologetic for existing. But when that rapist had a knife to Anne-Marie's throat, my body saved her life. When that barn was burning, my strength saved a child. When Silas needed someone to work beside him, my endurance matched his stride for stride. She looked directly at Father Hayes. You call me demon-possessed because I don't fit your idea of what a woman should be. Small, weak, obedient, quiet, unable to defend herself. But God made me big. God made me strong. And I'm done apologizing for his design. She turned to address the entire room. You want to know if I'm mentally fit? Ask yourselves this. Is it sane to torture someone for 5 days because they saved a rape victim? Is it rational to excommunicate a woman for defending the defenseless? Is it sound judgment to let a rapist walk free but punish his victim's rescuer? Because if that's sanity, then yes, I'm insane, and I'm proud of it. The courtroom exploded, half the crowd on their feet cheering, the other half shouting condemnation. Judge Pritchard's gavel nearly broke from the force of his banging. When order was finally restored, Pierce delivered his closing argument. Sympathetic stories don't change facts. Miss Brennan is abnormally large, abnormally strong, and has killed a man. She broke sacred restraints during a holy ritual. She's entered into an improper relationship. These are not the actions of a fit, stable woman. Find her unfit and protect this community. Mother Agnes delivered our closing. My daughter has been called violent, but every act of supposed violence was in defense of others. She stopped a rape. She saved a child from fire. She broke restraints to survive torture. If protecting the helpless is violence, we need more violence in this world. If refusing to die quietly is instability, we need more instability. Sarah Brennan is the sanest person in this room because she knows the difference between justice and cruelty. The jury, 12 local men, filed out to deliberate. Sarah and I sat together, hands joined beneath the table. Whatever happens, I whispered, we face it together. Together, she agreed. 45 agonizing minutes passed. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, the jury returned. Judge Pritchard spoke. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman, a farmer named Jacob Reeves, stood. We have your honor. In the matter of Sarah Brennan's mental and spiritual fitness, how do you find the pause seemed to last forever? We find Miss Brennan is mentally and spiritually fit to inherit and manage property. The courtroom erupted. Sarah collapsed against me, sobbing. I held her tight, my own tears falling. But Jacob Reeves continued speaking, his voice cutting through the noise. However, we recommend mandatory church oversight of the property for 1 year to ensure Miss Brennan demonstrates continued stability and sound management. Mother Agnes jumped up. That wasn't part of the trial parameters. Judge Pritchard banged his gavel. The jury has spoken. Miss Brennan is declared fit, but the Convent of the Sacred Heart will be subject to quarterly inspections by church officials for 1 year. If no incidents of violence or gross mismanagement occur, full ownership transfers unrestricted. It was a partial victory. We'd won, but with conditions that gave the church continued power over Sarah's life. Father Hayes stood, his face tight with barely controlled rage. I accept the verdict, and I will personally conduct the oversight inspections. Any violation, any incident of violence or instability, and the property will be forfeit immediately. But then Marcus Webb stood up from our side of the room. Your Honor, before we adjourn, I have evidence of fraud that's relevant to these proceedings. Every head in the room turned. Judge Pritchard frowned. What fraud? Marcus approached the bench with a folder of documents. I have land deeds, partnership agreements, and witness statements proving that Father Donovan Hayes and Clayton Voss are business partners. They have a signed agreement. If church property is seized and sold, Hayes receives 40% of the sale price. He laid the documents on the judge's bench. This entire proceeding was never about Miss Brennan's fitness. It was about two men using church authority to steal valuable land for personal profit. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Judge Pritchard examined the documents, his face growing darker with each page. Father Hayes turned purple. This is slander. Those documents are forged. They're notarized by the county clerk, Marcus said calmly, with dates, signatures, witness marks, all public record available to anyone who bothers to look. Judge Pritchard's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Father Hayes Clayton Voss, you will remain in Copper Ridge pending investigation of these allegations. If they prove true, you will face charges of fraud, conspiracy, and abuse of ecclesiastical authority. He turned to Sarah. Miss Brennan, given this evidence of ulterior motives, I'm removing the oversight requirement. You are declared fully fit and competent. The property is yours without restriction. The gavel came down with finality. We'd won. Completely. Father Hayes was shouting threats and denials as the sheriff escorted him from the building. Clayton Voss followed, his face ashen. Jacob Brennan slipped out a side door, abandoning his allies to save himself. Outside, the crowd that had gathered erupted into a mix of celebration and argument. Some people congratulated Sarah. Others spat curses. Most just stood in shock at how completely the tables had turned. Sarah and I stood on the courthouse steps. She was shaking, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. Mother Agnes emerged with tears streaming down her weathered face. You're free, child. Truly free. That evening, back at the convent, we held a small celebration. Mother Agnes baked a lopsided cake. Clara Henshaw brought food. Marcus brought whiskey. Doc Amelia brought medicine for the headaches we'd all have from tension release. 3 days later, Sarah and I married in the small chapel at the convent. Father Bernard refused to perform the ceremony, still loyal to Hayes despite everything. But we found a young priest named Father Michael who'd watched the trial and been moved by Sarah's testimony. We're gathered to join Silas Mackenzie and Sarah Brennan in holy matrimony, he began. This is not a union the church hierarchy approves of. Some have called it blasphemous. He smiled, which tells me it's exactly what God wants. Because God loves the outcasts, the condemned, the ones the powerful reject. When he asked for objections, Clayton Voss's brother stood up. But one look at Sarah and me standing together, united, ready to fight anyone who tried to separate us, and he sat back down without speaking. I do, I said, my voice steady. I do, Sarah said, looking down at me with those winter sky eyes full of love. By the power vested in me, not by church hierarchy, but by God himself, I pronounce you husband and wife. Our kiss was witnessed by 50 people who'd chosen to stand with us despite social pressure. It wasn't the grand wedding either of us might have dreamed of in another life, but it was real. It was ours, and that made it perfect. The years that followed were hard but good. We worked the land together. Sarah's strength and my skill proved to be an unbeatable combination. Within 2 years, the Convent of the Sacred Heart was one of the most productive properties in the territory. We took in orphans just as the convent always had, taught them farming, trapping, reading, writing, everything we knew. Gave them a home where being different wasn't a curse. 9 months after our wedding, Sarah gave birth to our first child, a daughter we named Anna after my first wife. The labor was 18 hours, intense but manageable. Doc Amelia attended, coaching Sarah through every contraction. When I held my daughter for the first time, healthy and squalling and perfect, I wept. Sarah, exhausted and triumphant, watched me with eyes that understood. This was redemption. This was hope reborn. Over the years, we had 3 more children, Samuel, Rebecca, and Thomas. All inherited Sarah's unusual size. All faced discrimination because of it. But they also grew up in a home where being different was celebrated, where strength was valued, where they learned that the world's opinion mattered less than self-knowledge. The community slowly changed its view of Sarah. When she saved 3 children from drowning in a flood, carrying them through chest-deep water no other adult could navigate. When she helped rebuild half the town after a fire. When she delivered babies and nursed the sick and gave generously from our surplus harvest. By the time our children were grown, Sarah Mackenzie was no longer the demon nun. She was Mother Sarah, a pillar of the community, respected and even loved. Father Hayes and Clayton Voss were both convicted of fraud. Hayes was defrocked and spent 5 years in territorial prison. Voss lost everything and left Montana in disgrace. Jacob Brennan was never charged, but his reputation was destroyed. He died alone 10 years later, having burned every bridge he'd ever built. Marcus Webb became uncle to our children, teaching them tracking and trapping in the ways of the wilderness. Doc Amelia delivered all 4 of our babies and became Sarah's closest friend. Mother Agnes lived to 90, long enough to see the convent flourish and to hold her great-grandchildren in her arms. Sister Anne Marie left the convent, eventually married a good man, and had 5 children of her own. She and Sarah remained close until Anne Marie's death at 73, their friendship forged in fire and tempered by shared understanding of survival. Now I'm 90 years old, lying in a cabin in the mountains where I once hid from life. Sarah died 3 years ago at 85, her body finally worn out from decades of hard labor and generous living. I buried her beside Anna and our stillborn son. 3 graves in the mountain meadow where wildflowers bloom every spring. My grandson Henry has finished writing everything down. His hand is cramped, his notebook nearly full. "Granddad," he says quietly, "did you ever regret it, saying yes, taking on all that hardship?" I look at him with eyes that have seen most of a century. Boy, those 30 days of courtship were the beginning of the greatest adventure of my life. Your grandmother was the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman who ever walked this earth. I coughed, my lungs rattling. We faced down the church, rebuilt a dying convent, raised 4 children who all grew up to be good people. We loved each other fiercely for 57 years. We built something that mattered. I reach out and grip Henry's hand with what little strength remains. So when that Miller girl tells you you're not man enough, you remember something. Being a man isn't about size or strength or fitting into what others expect. It's about having the courage to stand beside someone who needs you, to choose love over fear, to build something beautiful even when the world says it's impossible. My voice drops to a whisper. The greatest treasures are the ones everyone else is too afraid to claim. I claimed mine the day I said yes to your grandmother, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Henry is crying now, his tears falling on the pages of his notebook. Thank you, Granddad, for telling me the truth. I close my eyes. Sarah's face appears behind my eyelids, young and beautiful, as she was that first day in the wagon. Those winter sky eyes, those gentle hands, that fierce, unbreakable spirit. I'm coming, Sarah, I whisper. I kept my promise. I didn't let you suffer alone. Not for one single day. The last thing I hear is Henry's voice reading back the opening line he's written. Will you take the banished nun as your wife? And somewhere in the darkness that's closing in, I hear my own voice from 57 years ago. I will. Always. Forever. The end came quietly in the Montana winter of 1930. Silas Mackenzie died holding his grandson's hand, a smile on his weathered face, at peace with a life well lived and a love that had conquered everything the world tried to throw against it. Henry Mackenzie published his grandfather's story in 1932. It became a testament to courage, to choosing love over fear, to standing beside those the world rejects. The story of the 43rd man who said yes. And in the mountains of Montana, 3 graves stand together in a meadow where wildflowers bloom each spring. Anna Mackenzie died 1869. Baby Mackenzie died 1869. Sarah Mackenzie died 1927. And beside them a 4th grave added in 1930. Silas Mackenzie, the man who proved that the greatest treasures are the ones everyone else is too afraid to claim.